All right, we are live. David Hart here from the G4 Guitar Network. What we're going to talk about today is team building. The idea of team building is that we want to be able to take your groups and turn them into teams so they think with a different kind of mentality. So that what you're doing is getting a business that's building around this team spirit. I've got some ideas that I'm going to share, but I'm also going to get the guys to contribute some ideas as well. And together we should be able to nut this out and work out what we need to do to get an effective team building strategy happening. So, Michael, I'll just throw to you for a second. You said to me earlier that you're having you've got some questions as far as you just want to know how to bring the students together and so forth. Can you just say that again for me?
Yeah. So I think my main question was more so to do with teenagers, but all age groups, but especially teenagers, as I've noticed that they tend to be a bit more shy, and they'll play very quietly because they're afraid of but I just want them to feel comfortable and relaxed in the lesson. So I was just wondering if anyone had any techniques or strategies that they use to help people in groups feel more relaxed and comfortable.
Great, excellent. Okay, well let me. I've got a few ideas that I'll throw out there. We'll go through those ideas and we can elaborate on them and maybe give some examples, and then we can see if we can come up with anything else to add to it as well. What I want to do before that to kind of premise this is to stress the importance of group building and why it will really be one of those pivotal things in your business that'll take it to the next level or even take it exponential. People, by their very nature, we like to be part of something that's exciting, something that seems to be growing, something that has a bright future. And this is why people, they're banned around football teams or new ideas, politicians, whatever. People like the excitement behind something that they can be a part of, that they can champion on, and what you need to do to make that happen is obviously build a team kind of spirit. Everyone, even though people support a football team, they don't own that team. They don't get a trophy. They don't get anything from that point of view. But they love being a part of it because they do feel it's their team. They take ownership of that team. And one of the best ways to team build is to make people feel like they're partly an owner in what you're doing, and it serves everybody. It serves them, it serves the team, because they still get that same feeling. You don't have to own a team or a football team to know the feeling of your team winning and being a part of that experience. It's just as exciting, sometimes more exciting for the fans than it is for the actual players. So let's sort of look at that from the point of view of your business. With what you're doing with your teaching, is that if your students feel a part of something that is exciting and growing, and they feel like a team member, if you like, supporting your school, then they're going to give a lot more of themselves. They're going to want to be there a lot more, and they're going to want to support not just you as the owner, but also support the other students. And so everybody benefits. Being in a group and having that support from people around you is, it's I can't overstate it. It's such an important thing, and it's really what I did within see, if I go back to my early teaching, I started, like most people, started teaching at home, and I was at the same time I was working in retail in a sales team, and we had salespeople all over the country. It was a retail store. It was Australia's largest retailer of we call consumer electronics at the time, and in America they have some of our Best Buys these days, or in Australia they have the Good Guys. I'm not sure what they have in the UK, but that was the kind of organisation that I worked for. And I would work with a team. There was, at any given time, there was at least 3 or 4 of us on the floor selling, sometimes more on the weekends when it was busy. And we were just bouncing off each other. We were almost like a basketball team. We were kind of throwing the ball to each other. If someone had a customer that they couldn't quite handle, then they would throw it to someone else, and we would inevitably get the sale. So when I went from that to teaching home teaching guitar at home by myself, it felt very lonely. It felt like, it's just me here, and I'll go mad if it's just me, because I'm a team player. I like working with other people, as I think you guys can appreciate. So that's where I took my teaching outside of where I was living and put it into a commercial studio, and then brought in, first I brought in one other teacher, and then I brought in someone to work in, I had a little shop, and then ended up with a couple of teachers. By the end of it, sold that business, and then went on and did it bigger and better. And I ended up, with one of the biggest schools in Australia as a suburban music school, and it was all based on team building. And that's what I thrive on, and that's what most people thrive on, is having that team idea. So if you're bringing students in and teaching them in groups and not building the team spirit there, not sort of harnessing that team, you're really going to miss out on it, and it's not going to work. You're going to find yourself struggling. So I've written 4 things down today that I think, I'm sure I can come up with a bigger list than this, but these are the 4 things that sort of came to mind as the most prominent things about working, team building, with your groups. So the first is to connect the group members, finding common ground. So let's do this now. Both of you guys, just turn your mics on, and we'll do a little bit of this connecting. Okay, so Michael, how old are you?
27.
27, good.
I had to think about it for a sec.
I'm glad he asked you first.
97, excellent. Just think that's the age Hendrix died. He achieved so much by the time he was 27. Okay, Ben, how old are you?
23.
23. Okay, cool. So you guys are in your 20s. There's a bit of a similarity there. You're certainly closer to each other than you are to me. So there's a connection right there. You've really grown up more or less in the same musical era. So there's a lot of things that you probably would relate to as far as, technology and everything. There's a lot of commonality there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep digging deeper. I won't spend too much time on this because it could take a little while, but it doesn't matter. You're teaching your groups from week to week, and you also have that 5-week intro with your students so you get to know. So Ben, what were some of your early influences? Why did you get into music?
Well, I ended up just playing guitar kind of by accident, I guess. I was given a guitar for my 6th birthday.
Yep.
As far as I remember, I was playing it all the time, and then within a month, they thought, let's stop the noise and let's get some lessons so it makes sense. And the lessons just, I think they were fun, or maybe they were just really interesting. I definitely wanted to keep going, whether it was because I was enjoying it or because I wanted to get better, I'm not sure, but it was definitely just, I'm doing this, I'm going to keep doing this. So I didn't have a guitarist, so I thought, I really want to pick up the guitar because of that guy.
Okay,
I just kept playing, and I learned some classical, and it was just satisfying,
Yeah. Well, I think when you start younger, it's not so much about, musical idols or guitar heroes. It's just about the idea of playing guitar commonly. Okay, cool. And Michael, what age did you start on guitar?
I was around 10 when my father bought me a guitar. He played a couple of chords, and he just showed me, how to do that. But I think it was really when I was 13 that it was really a social thing. It was because my best mate from school, he started learning guitar, and it was something that I could show him a couple of things on how to do, and then we both kind of were learning together. And we had another classmate who was playing drums, and we started our own little band in when I was 13, 14. And so for me, it was my social outlet more than anything, and that inspired me to get better.
Okay, cool. And did you have a teacher at some point?
Technically, no. I did have a friend of my father's, though, who was a guitarist, and he would come around every few weeks, and we'd spend a couple of hours. He'd just go through some chords and some basic stuff with me, and so he in a way he was my teacher.
Okay.
But I didn't have any paid lessons or anything like that. No.
All right, cool, no worries. Okay, so what I'm and I will keep sort of exploring. Obviously, we don't have enough time to do it here, but what I do is I keep exploring, getting to know more about you guys and what you're into. and then looking for connections between the two of you. So then what I can do is say to Ben, hey Ben, Michael, he's also into Justin Bieber. I know you guys share that passion together, so how about you guys get together and teach each other your favorite Justin Bieber songs? But you know what I'm saying? It's about finding those areas that you have a kind of a commonality, and as you start to do that, what happens is that I'm setting you up to have things to talk about, things that you can sort of, after the lesson, you can get out into the waiting room and you can actually say, hey, what albums have you got, or what albums have you got, or when did you first get into that particular player, etc. So that's really your mission, is to connect each of your students in your groups so that they have this kind of they have this common ground that they can relate to. Does that all make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Ultimate Song List would probably help a lot with that, wouldn't it?
That's why I invented it. It was all about trying to work out. Okay, you write down for me. If I could have my way, I'd say go home and write a 10-page profile and let me know about it. And look, you can learn a lot about people these days online. I know it's harder with younger kids, but you can go and look at people's profiles, and people go, I don't want to go snooping around other people's private information. Well, it's not private. They're putting it onto the internet on Facebook. It can't be private. They want people to know about it. They wouldn't put it there if they didn't want people to know about it. My father doesn't have a Facebook account. He doesn't put anything online because he doesn't want to do that. He lives in that other era where he doesn't want to have his life out there in the public space. But people who do it, I don't put anything on Facebook or on YouTube or anything that I don't want people to see. So don't ever feel like you're snooping around. What you're trying to do is find information on people so that you can then better serve them. You can understand what they're into, what they like. So the one thing I will say about that, though, is just because things appear on their Facebook page, don't assume. It's better to confirm. In other words, if I go and look at one of your Facebook pages and you've got a like there for some artist or whatever, it might have been something you accidentally clicked on. It might have been that a friend told you to click on it, so you did it for a friend, or you might just do it for a joke. So always confirm people's interests, and probably best not to say, look, I went looking at your Facebook page without an invite and saw that you like this, this, and this. What's that?
So I was going to say, did my Facebook page say that I like Justin Bieber? Because I'm pretty sure I haven't liked that, but anyway.
No, not yet. No, I went and looked at your Facebook page, yes. So just keep looking for those kind of things and where you can connect people. And what you will find is that it won't take long. In most cases, it's I think probably 3 or 4 questions, and you can tend to find what common ground people are into. The reason I'm not going to do this here with you guys is because this is a public video recording. I don't know what you want to share, so I don't want to sort of do that with you right here and go into all the kind of things that you like and don't like, because I don't want people watching these videos and judging what your interests are. Everybody has different interests, and that's great. There's no good or bad out there. It's just whatever you're into. But if I had you in a group scenario and I get to know you, or even one-on-one through those intros, that's why the 5-week intro is so important, is I get to know you, what you're interested in, what you like, and then when I bring you together with other students, then I know what they like, so then I can talk about what you both like. And then that brings that sort of common ground together. An example that I've used before, but I'll sort of bring it again. I had 5 girls, teenage girls, which is the area that we're talking about here, and they're all sort of 13, 14, and originally I had 2 lots of 2, so 2 girls were friends over here and 2 girls were friends over here, and these were my early groups, and I only had small groups of generally 2 at a time. And then what happened is that I put the 2 and 2 together, so we had these 2 girls here who knew each other really well, and these 2 girls who knew each other really well, but they didn't know each other. So it was a kind of a little bit, how do I connect these girls? But because they had a friend, all of them had a friend in the group, they were okay, they were relaxed, they were comfortable, and it wasn't too hard to bring those four girls together, and especially because they were around the same age, they had some similar interests, and they obviously lived in the same area, so there were connections there. But then I brought another girl in who was a kind of very gothic girl who really seemed to be the odd one out, and she was almost for the other four girls, she was a little bit intimidating or scary at the beginning because she looked quite different in appearance to what they were into. But what I worked out was that one of the girls out of the four had an interest in the same music that the gothic girl had. So I raised that point, and then I realized that there was another girl in the group who also was into that same group. So I had three girls, I think, and one who was sort of on the fringe of it. So there was really four of them that were all like this particular group. My Chemical Romance was the group, actually, who were popular, obviously 10 years ago. But the thing is that the fifth girl got into it anyway because the other four girls were all into it, and so I was able to unite them over this group, and it just turns out that that group was very popular at that time, and they were touring, I think, in a couple of weeks, and the girls were all talking about how they're going to the tour and got their tickets, and so this really brought that group together, and that gothic girl and one of the other girls ended up becoming best friends through this music and through learning guitar. Prior to that, they didn't know each other, and that's really what you're trying to do, is you're trying to bring them together under a common kind of umbrella. Okay, so number two that I have here, and feel free, questions as always if you want to ask or elaborate on something. Number two here is... Sorry? Yep.
I just have one question on that topic. So let's just say, I mean, obviously finding common ground. Let's just say, I mean, if it's about the style of music or the artists that they like, that's obviously very much related to music and guitar and everything. What if that particular topic you can't find any sort of common ground, like one girl's into metal, the next girl's into Taylor Swift, and they hate each other's style of music? What other topics can you sort of touch base on without getting too personal and seeming awkward?
Yep. Well, yeah, I know what you're talking about. You've got kind of these students on polar ends, musically, and of course we're learning music, so they're into different things. What you can do in those situations is, just try and find something else that'll bring them together under kind of a common idea. I mean, one is obviously they play guitar, so they both have an interest in guitar. That's always going to be a commonality amongst them. So it could be talking about different types of guitars, or it could be talking about other things that especially if they're around the same age. If we're talking, teenagers who are sort of 14 and 15 and 16, what are teenagers into at the moment? What's cool for them? What unites them as teenagers? And most teenagers, they are into particular things at a particular time. It's very hard for me in this position to sort of put my finger on one thing, but I would be looking for what it is. Is it fashion? Is there somebody that they all think's really cool at the moment? Is there a certain kind of movie that's popular amongst that age group? You know what I mean? Just keep digging until you find out what they're into and where you can find some common ground. And sometimes it takes more work than sometimes you'll do it almost straight away in the very first lesson you bring them together. Other times it might take a month or two or even 3 months to find that common ground. Sometimes you may never find it, and that's okay as well. If that's the case, then that's just how it pans out. And this is again about not trying to be perfect. Not everything works. Not every single group that you have. There's no such thing as perfect. Basically, what's going to happen is that the groups are going to be of varying degrees. Some will work really well. Some will work a little bit okay. So it just depends. Okay.
I have a question on the side of that, David.
Sure.
If they are on polar ends of the spectrum, normally we'd take little bits of songs that use the skills we're working on and say, here's that skill being used in this song. Would you recommend not doing that if you're trying to build the group and it's music that they quite obviously one of them will hate and the other one will love, all the other way around? Would you try and find a bit more middle ground, or would you just swap between the ones that they like so they each get a bit of what they love?
Yeah, I would be careful. In other words, if you let's just say you've got someone in a group who absolutely loves Taylor Swift, right? Just a mad Taylor Swift fan, comes in dressed up looking like Taylor Swift and just really throwing it out there. And then you've got someone else who just absolutely hates Taylor Swift, who thinks that her music is the worst thing that's ever been invented. Then it really, you've got this tension between these two. So by you got to kind of be careful, I guess. You got to. It's really like being on the opposite ends of the political spectrum. You've got good people on both ends, but we know it's quite common that opposites attract, and this is something where they start to see in each other the differences, and then they learn to appreciate those differences and find it very interesting. And it's really about opening that up. And what I always do, I make a very clear point, and I'll do this even within what we're doing. If you ever see it on Facebook and in the groups, is we need to respect each other's interests in music. It doesn't matter what you're into. I don't care who you like or what you like. I'm not going to judge you based on your musical interests. I have an opinion and what I like, but it doesn't mean that what I like is right or better than what you like. So I really make this clear in my groups about everyone, and I actually promote it. I say, look, it's great to be a crazy mad fan of anyone, because that's what often motivates us, inspires us to learn music. You look at most of the great musicians, they had absolute idols that they looked up to, that they wanted to be like, and that's what drove them so hard to practice like crazy and just be so single focused. So what I would do is I would look at if I've got this, mad sort of Taylor Swift fan on one side and, heavy metal on the other side, what I see is a commonality. I see these are two people who are very passionate about their music. So that's what I would be saying. I'd say I admire you guys because you're so passionate about what you're into, and that's what it's all about. When I was a kid, it was just Jimmy Page. When I was real young, it was Paul McCartney. I had these kind of idols that I wanted to be like, and that's what drove me and made music my passion. There was a thing on last night here in Queensland, anyway, called when I think it was when the Beatles were big or something like that. It's basically when the Beatles came to Australia, and people who were there, and they were interviewing a lot of the Australian kind of legend musicians who were big in the 70s and 80s, and these guys were mad Beatles fans. They lined up for like 3 days, camped out for 3 days just to buy a ticket to go to a Beatles concert. In Adelaide, the Beatles weren't going to Adelaide, but Adelaide rallied, and they've got 100,000 signatures signed to bring the Beatles to Adelaide. And this is a city that at the time I think had about 500,000 people, so 20% of the town. And when the Beatles agreed to go there, half the town turned out, like 300,000 people turned out on the streets, and it was just mayhem. This is what drove the Beatles, or really what drove a lot of the music that came out after that. A lot of the bands, a lot of the successful bands around the world. One of you guys mentioned Oasis before. Oasis were mad Beatles fans. So this is the thing, is that it doesn't matter what they're into. I don't care what music they're into, and I know we make a few jokes about Justin Bieber and whatever, just because he's an easy target. But still, he's driving a lot of people to want to be singers. So that's a great thing. What do we want? Do we want people becoming musicians, no matter what kind of musician, or do we want people becoming, something else? We're musicians. We love music. So okay, whatever it takes. These people are driving it. So when I see these two different students on different ends, then I celebrate it, and I really and I will, if I can, I will teach. I'll use a bit of a Taylor Swift, or I'll use a bit of Metallica or whatever, and show each other and say, look, you can see how this is going to work. just really combine it in the group and do both, and really use that as a chance to help them to understand that everybody has their own music, and that's okay. That nobody's better or worse or right or wrong.
Yeah, so tread slightly carefully at the beginning, but definitely make sure you do both.
Exactly. Yeah. Be mindful of everybody in the group, and if you've got what I do sometimes is I'll actually show how a Taylor Swift song is very similar to a Metallica song. I'll demonstrate.
So these are using the same chord sequence, just one's using a riff and one's using a arpeggio.
Exactly. One's got a bit more distortion than the other. There's really no difference. I did it with a Justin Bieber song. There's a Justin Bieber song there's a 2-5-1-6 jazz progression. And someone was saying, "Oh, Justin Bieber," blah, blah. And I'll say, "Well, this is the chord progression he uses in his song. You're a jazz dude. Surely you recognize that progression." Oh, really? Yeah. You don't have to love Justin Bieber, but look, the music that's behind him, he's got some of the best musicians in the world working behind him. You don't have to like that particular person to be able to understand and connect to their music. There's stuff going on. Taylor Swift as well, her guitarist. I read about him not long ago. He's one of the US's top young jazz musicians. Very, very good guitar player. So yeah, I've got musician friends who would go along and see people like Michael Bolton, who was considered to be, very not what you would tell your friends that you're into.
A bit cheesy.
Very cheesy, yeah. But these kind of guys, when they tour with the most amazing musicians. He didn't go for Michael Bolton. He went for the musicians that were playing behind him. He just loved, Randy Jackson playing bass. He toured with Michael Bolton a lot. But a lot of these top players, they're behind the scenes. It's like Deep Purple these days. Deep Purple, 60s rock band, but Steve Morse is the guitarist. Even if you're not into Deep Purple, you just go along and just see Steve Morse play.
Yeah.
So what I try and do is educate them a little bit on that as well. Try and find. It might be a thing where, okay, one's into Taylor Swift, and if you do a little bit of background work on it and look into it, you'll see that, maybe there's a guitarist or a drummer or someone who went on tour with Taylor Swift who also played for Metallica. You'll see these combinations of interesting things, and that's where you can really connect and go, because this is an industry, it's a music industry. Sure, you love this guy and you love this guy, but I'm telling you now, the best musicians infiltrate the business. They're up there
more
playing.
More than 80-20.
That's right. Exactly. Steve Lukather, who was one of my favourite guitar players. He played for just about everybody in the 80s. There's hardly anyone who wasn't successful in the 80s as a singer, or say a session where they needed a session guitarist, where Lukather didn't appear somewhere on an album. So. Okay, so second point I've got here is to acknowledge each person's input and encourage their input. And so when you're kind of in that scenario where you're teaching the group, then the more that you can actually get students to sort of input something, some information, somehow be involved, then the more that they will feel connected to that group. If they don't get to contribute anything, and they will feel left out on the fringe. So really, the more that you can get them inputting and simply asking them questions, and really sort of acknowledging their contribution to the group as well. So if we go back to that scenario of the Taylor Swift kind of Metallica paradigm, the person who's the Taylor Swift person, what they're bringing to the group is Taylor Swift. They're bringing her ideas, her music, and you're kind of employing them into the group. So you're exposing the group to these ideas, and that person who's the Taylor Swift fan, they actually feel that that's them, and you want them to feel that that's them. That's your contribution to this group. You're bringing that. So recognizing each, and that's why working with groups of 5 is about the right size, because if you get the group's any bigger than that, then it gets harder to do this sort of stuff. Working with a group of 5, you can really get to know each person and know what they're into, and it's understand their contribution to the group and highlight that contribution to the group. Any questions on that point? Forward. Yep. Okay. All right. So the third one, which is really important, is to make it easy for them to connect. Give them. There's several ways to do this. Well, there's several kind of ways to look at this. I had a waiting room. If you have a studio without a waiting room, where people have got to wait outside in their cars, or they've got to wait quietly in the teaching space, then it's going to be much harder for them to connect. You're not creating any room and space for them to connect. Having a waiting room is what creates an area where they can hang and have a couple of lounges there, and making it comfortable for them to come together and talk and chat. Now, that you can also think of it like a party. If you don't have a place where people can sort of, congregate, we've all been to those kind of parties where it might be in a big house somewhere, and there's only 20 people at the party, but because the house is so big, you've got people all spread out over the house, so they're not really connecting. They're all go and hide in different corners. Whereas if you create one room where the party happens, and everyone has to be in that room, and you set it up in such a way that everyone has to kind of look at each other and acknowledge each other, then you're going to get a much better atmosphere happening. You're going to get people connecting. So creating a connecting space is really important. And one of there's several geniuses behind this who are employed in their businesses. The first person is Richard Branson, who I mentioned. Now, Richard Branson, when he created the Virgin Music Stores, what he originally did was create a lounge area. I think he had beanbags on the floor and stuff like that. This is sort of back in the 70s. And that's where he really took off, because he created, what he wanted was this almost university campus type feel, where, he was coming out of university and he was all about the social thing, very social guy, as we know. And so he created these shops which weren't around before that, where people could come and hang out, and whether they bought music or not didn't matter. He just created an atmosphere where they could come, and obviously then they bought records and whatever else they wanted from his shops, and that's how the Virgin Music Stores really took off. Somebody else who did it, or Starbucks is the next best example, creating a space, not just selling coffee. And believe it or not, there were coffee shops around, but he got the idea from Europe. He saw how, when he went to Italy and France, that people would sit in these coffee shops and socialize and chat. Whereas in America, what was happening at that time, this is back in the 70s, I think, is that most people would just go up and buy a $2 or $1 cup of coffee from a stand, or from a kind of takeaway. There wasn't really a sitting area. You didn't sit down and have a cup of coffee, because coffee was just a $1 cheap drink. You couldn't provide seating area when you're making 20 cents a cup of coffee. So he took that idea and created a sitting space. So when people are paying for Starbucks coffee and paying more money for Starbucks coffee, they're not paying for better coffee, even though it's supposed to be better coffee. What they're paying for is the sitting and the environment. You're paying for the seat that you're sitting on. McDonald's did the same thing. McDonald's created a restaurant atmosphere where people would come and sit in a restaurant, have a meal, but what they did is, rather than come to your table to help them cut costs, you came to them and ordered over the counter. And even though in each case there were shops doing these things, these guys weren't really the first to invent them, but they were the first to do it well. And so each of them recognized that creating a social space is what will promote your business. Facebook have done it. Facebook have created a social space. That's why Facebook has become huge, because having an area, setting up the places to create social spaces, is where your business will thrive, because that gets people connecting. And it's all about making those connections. If you don't get your students connecting, then your business is not going to grow. It's going to stagnate. Does that make sense? It's all logical so far? Yes. Yeah. Yes, Michael?
Yeah, so I think that's probably one of my problems is that I don't have a separate waiting room. I've got a little section that's cornered off sort of thing, but they do have to wait quietly. They can't sort of just do whatever they want. Um,
Yeah.
Something that I'll have to look into is having some sort of a waiting room. But then the other thing that I was thinking, what you just said then was maybe creating a group specifically for my students on Facebook to connect. I mean, there's that sort of global group, but maybe if I sort of push it and get everyone to say it's just the students here, maybe that might be more appealing. I don't know.
I think so. I think having all you guys having a local group for guitar players. Like it doesn't have to be G4 specific students. It can be just a local Facebook group for guitar players in your area, and getting people to sort of connect. And if you own the group and you run the group, then it gives you the kind of space to be able to then market to them and really say, hey guys, we're having a jam at G4 Guitar in Penrith on Friday night, and that way it becomes something where you're bringing them together without them feeling like they're being sort of pushed into some kind of marketing group where you're just trying to sell to them. What you do is you create the space for them, help bring them together, and be there as a kind of a connector within the area. So people who are in the group, you invite them into the group. So you have a new student, etc., and then you say to them, "Hey, come and join our Facebook group." You don't have to talk; you can just watch and check it out. And some of these groups are slow to get off the ground. Others just take off. Our Facebook group, within G4, just took off like, house on fire. It was just didn't. There was no kind of push from me to get you guys to start, communicating on in the Facebook group. Whereas we've got other groups. I've got a group, G4 Guitar student group, where we've got 700 people in the group, and nobody talks. These are all guys who apparently want to learn guitar because the group's called Learn Guitar, but they never talk. So it's the same. I've got another teacher one as well, where there's 400 odd guitar teachers there, and they never talk. And I think it's partly getting them to know each other through kind of an offline situation, and then bringing them together online, if that makes sense. And I think that having a school gives you that advantage, is that you can start to connect them up. And so as you've got students in your group who know each other within the group, then they can connect to and then their friends start to see that, and their friends go, "Oh, what's this group? Guitar, I play guitar too." Bang, they look at it, and then they get involved, and then that gives you a very active group within your area that's talking about guitar. So, okay, so that making it easy to connect. It's not just the space, the physical space. It's also having other things that make it easy for them, giving them putting up things that they can talk about. And these are little things such as having a particular poster or something in your room, in your studio, or having topics of conversation that they can talk about. Change your studio every now and again. Change things the way it looks. The practice log and the top 3 created a real buzz for me. The students, especially the younger students, they hung out to see the top 3, and they would talk about, oh wow, look, somebody did 1,000 minutes this month. Wow. And so they would get excited and talk about it. And who was it? Who was it? They'd say, who did the 1,000 minutes? Who's Michael Essery? And I'd say, oh, he's a legend. He's one day you'll get to meet him. And oh wow, he must be good. Oh yeah, he's very good, very serious student. So there would be a bit of hero worshipping going on just within G4, just within my school, about who this guy is at number 1. And that would inspire the other students, and like I said, give them a talking point as well. Any other questions? Do you guys got any suggestions on making it easy to connect? Anyone want to throw up an idea? Yes, Michael?
Sorry, just one more, just back on what you were saying about the Facebook group. If I was to create one, would you call it like, suburb and then guitarists or suburb guitar students? Would you make the differentiation between someone who's learning the guitar and someone who kind of plays the guitar, or what do you think?
Because in your area, the thing about your area is that you have a limited population in any given area. So if you make it too narrow, you're not going to get many people in your group. You've got to make
You
it
just make it
broad.
guitar
Exactly. Guitar players, Penrith.
related.
That can be the name of your group. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay. Cool.
Can we
Okay.
take a little
So
bit longer on the Facebook group, David, or do you want to move on?
it's up to you. Yeah.
I
Go
was
for
just
it.
wondering how you actually market the Facebook. I say market, how you recruit for the Facebook group. Did you actually invite people one by one, or is there a way to get it kind of
Um,
trending, I guess is the word, isn't it?
it's interesting at the moment because it's trend like my Learn guitar group, which nobody's active in. Very rarely do I get many comments in their group. Somehow is trending. People are searching for learning guitar, I guess, and it's coming up high on search engines. So don't ask me why, but we're getting some between 2 and maybe 10 new people joining every day. That group.
Wow.
But they're
With
not
little
active.
activity.
No, there's not much going on. Maybe it'll tip at some point, and there will be a lot of activity. Maybe they're just guys looking for free stuff. They just see the group, they
Yeah.
search, and they have a look. They join the group to see if they can get something free, and then when they see nothing there, or they go and get the G4 guitar method. Some of them, then they move on. I don't know, but yeah, you can put a post up there, and you get 2 or 3 people like it, and that's about it. And there's 700 people supposed to be in that group.
But you can share a group just as a post on your website, for example, and not on your website, on your Facebook page.
Yeah, for your local scene, the way that I would do it is don't worry too much about the numbers. People get really kind of locked into the number group. I look at our group, where we've got sort of 80 odd members, the G4 Guitar Network, and there's about 10% of that 80, about 8 of you, 8 to maybe 12, who are really active, and the rest are just sort of watching. And that's pretty well standard across I've read the stats on it. In nearly all groups, all situations, you'll get it's the 80-20 rule again. You're going to get about 15%, 10 to 15% of people who are active. You're going to get the bulk of people who are just going to be observers, and then you get a small number of people on the other end who don't even observe. They somehow join the group, but they never look at it, never go to it. So that's pretty well the breakup. It's the bell curve, the classic bell curve. So what you want to do is get people who are active. They're the people who are going to make your group interesting, because the people who are looking or observing, they're only going to observe if there's something there to observe. So you need at least a couple of people, and that's why I know our group's great, because there's a couple of us, there's enough people there who are really active, like yourself, who keep it interesting, and it's almost like a newsreel where guys want to come back and every day they log in. I know, because I see their likes, and I see that you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but I can see it. I can see who's viewed each post, and there's guys there who never comment, but they view every post. So,
Seen by 11. No responses.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Now I know some of them don't actually. They just click on the page and don't actually. They just scroll past it, and they still counts as a view. But I know that if they're appearing on every one, then they're viewing some of the material. They're coming to the group. They're coming. They're logging in.
Enough to scroll down.
Exactly. They're looking for stuff. They're looking for information and answers. And it's really interesting. What I find interesting about the whole thing is that when you do this and when you're out there and you're kind of involved a lot, you, as will happen with you, Ben, inevitably, it's probably already happened, is that you will become a star within the group. And as G4 expands, people will talk about you because you've been a contributor. You become one of the main faces of the group. And that's what you want to do, because within any group, it's not for everyone, of course, but it's something you don't want to be afraid of. Is probably a better way to put it. In that it's going to really serve you in the long run. You'll gain more and more respect, more and more people will give back to you. It's just the way that we are. The more you give, the more people will give back to you. So.
As long as I post, I haven't posted any more. I've just made them like 5 times as long, so it seems like I've got more going on.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's funny because even if you're putting up stuff that it sometimes is maybe too much, it can feel like it's too much.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I know that sometimes I feel, oh, hang on, maybe I'm just sharing a bit too much, or I'm hogging the microphone a little bit too much, so to speak. In the groups, maybe I should step back and let some of the other guys contribute more. You kind of got to find that balance, but at the same time, it's better to say too much than not enough. I strongly believe that. So, in this scenario, of course.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, just to say a bit too much more, you've got the Hangouts are doing well for our group because that gives you the basis for talking. I can invite my students to the local Facebook group.
Yep.
But have you got any ideas for getting kind of that initial connection? Because as you say, in person, once they've even met, because they're so hard to gauge tone on Facebook with no kind of history, that people are very cautious about making jokes, and that seems to be how most people connect on kind of online scenarios.
All right, it's very easy to get people to your Facebook group. Step 1 is to get them to your group. Step 2 is to get them to be involved. So the first step is to get the group, and it's very easy to do. All you do is that you say to them, guys, I'm going to post this up on the Facebook group tonight. Someone might say, oh, can we get the tab for that song? Or can you, or you might mention something, there's this great video. Has anyone seen it? No, I haven't seen it. Well, I'm going to post it up in the Facebook group tonight. They're all going to end up going to the group at some point.
Make it the hub for anything that you give to them.
Yeah, don't, and when they email you a question, and you guys know that I've done this, rather than say, give them the answer in the email, say, great question, I'm going to post it up in the Facebook group and my answer will be up there. Thanks for the question. And that way you keep referring them to the group. So that they end up having to go there to get the information, and then they get involved. You're doing it for their good, because then they will see, when you post up that question they're asking, you don't put their name up there. Only they can do it. Yeah. But you put up the question and then you answer it, and then other people answer it as well. Oh, it might be a question like, how do I restring my guitar, or I'm having trouble tuning my guitar, whatever the question is. Go, great question, I'm going to post it up in the Facebook group, here's the link to the group, go to the group and you'll see the answer. That gets them to the group, and then that gets them looking at other answers. Generally they start reading other information and other questions from other people.
Yeah.
All right. What you're wanting to do is really look at what I'm doing. I'm learning from the masters in this business, and I'm passing this really down to you. I'm trying to act as a kind of a role model for you guys, as a sort of a model that you can use to build your own businesses. In other words, the value that you guys get from G4, from being part of the network, that if you went to a consultant, a business consultant, and you paid them, like I'm talking about a good business consultant, someone with my 30 years of experience, and you paid them, then you might get an hour with them for what you pay as a monthly fee. You might get to sit down with them for 1 hour and ask questions and they give answers. Now within G4, you get tons more than that. And that's because I take what we're doing and I leverage it. I take your questions, I take everybody else's questions, and I bring it together and I put it into the Facebook group, and I get you guys sort of helping and sharing with each other. So I'm always leveraging, and what that does is creates tons more value for you guys. So you want to do the same for your students. You want to take every question that they give you and turn it into content. So that if one student asks a question, you don't have to keep repeating that question, that you can turn it into content, put it up on your website or on your Facebook, and then you can take that information, you can turn it into a book in a year from now. top 10 questions asked by G4 guitar students, in Penrith or in Surbiton. So whatever you do, try and think about how you can leverage that and leverage your time. That's what I'm doing here, recording this video. It's not just me spending time with you guys. It's actually, this is going to probably eventually be seen by thousands of people who will benefit from this, hour or hour and a half that we spend on here. Make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. All right. So all right. So and we're on topic, even though this seems a little bit off topic. We're actually on topic. Connecting your students is about bringing them together in a space somewhere. So when we're talking about Facebook, when we're talking about Google Hangouts, look, why not have a Google Hangout with your students? Why not once a month to start with? You can later go do it more often if you like, but and I'll come in as a special guest sometime if you want. And what you do is you say, we're having a Google Hangout. David Hart, who's the creator of the G4 guitar method, is going to come and jump in with us for half an hour and answer any questions and be involved. So come along. It's for parents are welcome, students are welcome. And get confirmation. Say who can be there, and that way, and say it's limited to just stick a thing up on your board. I can only have 9 people, 8 people, because if you're there and I'm there, it's limited to 8 people. And our first one's coming up, bang, and then get those people on the list, get them invited, and have a couple of reserves in case people pull out, and then do it, and then try and make it a monthly event. To start with, and it's like an extra bonus lesson, and you're leveraging your time, giving your students more value, and recording the video as well, like I'm doing here, so that you can then that they can watch it back. Yes, Michael.
Is there actually a limit on how many people you would have? I mean, does it get really slow and stuff, or
yeah, Google have a limit. Google only allow 10 people on Hangout.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't invite any more after 10. So, yeah.
Okay.
But what you can do, this actual video is live, so there's a link that people can go to and watch it now. So even if they're not here in the group, anyone can watch it. There could be 1 million people watching us right now, and we wouldn't know. So anyone can hook into this link and watch it. So. So that's the thing you can do, is you can also, once your group's full, you can then send out a link to everybody else who can't get into the actual chat. But I would start it off initially just inviting people to the thing and not talking about you can get the live stream. The live stream can come later as you become more and more popular, as you really build an audience and if you do it at the same time, and this is what I'm not doing, just because I'm trying to be flexible with you guys, but if you have at the same time like a TV program, then you will get regular viewers, because people tend to follow patterns. And so if you're on Monday nights at 7 o'clock every Monday, come and see Michael live, and he's going to do an online lesson and feedback and whatever for the students. All right. Lots of ideas. There's no end to where this is all going, but we're talking about here about how to bring your students together. So just keep that as the main theme here of connecting your students. Make it easy to connect. Number 4 is, and this is my last point that I'll throw in today, is praise the strengths of each person in front of the group. People actually like to be around people who admire them and who are kind of like can acknowledge their strengths and recognize what they're good at. So if you're, let's say for instance that you know a lot about a particular topic. Let's say you're a guitar enthusiast who knows all the different types. I've got a friend who's like this. Okay, he knows all the different kinds of guitars. He knows all the different amps. Who invented them, when they were built, He's just like an absolute geek on all this sort of stuff. And me, I like guitars, and I know, the main guitars, but I don't really care. I just pick it up, and if it feels good, feels right, I'm happy with it. I don't really care who made it, where it came from. I'm just not into that. I'm into the music and the playing guitar. I'm not into the building and making guitar. So when he talks to me, I switch off. I say, dude, I'm not really interested. I know you want to tell me all this stuff, and you think because I'm a guitarist I want to know it all, but I don't. It really doesn't interest me. So he feels kind of like, when he's talking about that particular topic, when we talk about other topics, it's great. When we talk about guitar and music itself, it's great. But when we're talking about different models of guitars, when they were built and why they have different kinds of maple necks and ash bodies and all this sort of stuff, I switch off. But when he's around other guys, and I've been there, who are into that, he's in his element, and he loves it because the people that he's around. For those of you who are in Australia who may have heard of Charles Cillier. Charles Cillier knows guitars really well and makes beautiful guitars, and that's why I've got one. But when they get together, then they can just keep on going and chatting and acknowledging each other's kind of intelligence and wisdom with guitars and whatever. So there's a lot of respect there, and so people like to be around people who can acknowledge and respect them, and that's me here, right? You guys can see that I've got a lot of experience and a lot of history in this area, and I also like talking about it. Whereas that I can go somewhere else, and I'm a complete dunce, so to speak. I'm completely clueless in other subjects, and so I feel out of water. As far as my Japanese skills, for instance, when I get around a lot of my wife's friends and their husbands, some of them can speak fluent Japanese, and here I am still struggling. I feel awkward when it comes to talking about the Japanese language. But in this subject, I don't feel at all awkward. I feel like I know this inside out, upside down. So one of the things here is by praising the strengths of each individual in the group, and this is my point about a team building exercise, is that it raises that particular person's profile within the group, and then they feel more connected to that group, and they want to be in that group. They want to be in that space. So if your students feel good when they come to you and they come to that group, if that's their space where they feel good, then that's where they're going to keep coming. They're going to keep returning, and even after they get to a certain skill level, they won't get bored, because what happens is they now feel important in that arena. That's where they gain a lot of their identity from, is by being in that group. And especially as they get better, as they improve and their guitar playing improves, people look to them. And if you can look at your particular strengths, and I'm going to do this exercise with you guys right now, is to look at what your particular strengths are, and why within this group each of you has a different strength, that by me highlighting that strength to the rest of the group will become something that you will now be respected for and acknowledged for. So let me start with Alex. Are you there, Alex? I can't see your face, but I can see your microphone. Is Alex still with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, Alex. So let's talk about your strengths. Okay, what you're really good at. Now, I know you're having your breakfast there, so I'll just talk and get this going. One of the things that I think, and this is just my instinct, is going on with you, is that you've got a couple of guys working for you. Is that right? A couple of teachers working for you? Yeah.
Totally.
And how are they going? Are they doing well?
Yeah, they're doing really well. James is pretty much, I call him like my second in command. He pretty much runs the place for me as a manager, and I'm looking at keeping him on, like, instead of going back to England, if we can work out the various fiscal things. And Jackson's doing really well as well. He's was doing an education degree, but chose to discontinue that because I like to think because what he saw, what we were doing, he just saw sort of the inefficiency of it, and he's kind of So, but I mean, he's really stoked on what we're doing too, and he's really committed. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, great. So he can see the potential in what you're doing probably as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
This, whether you realise it or not, I recognise it from where I'm sitting almost instantly, and that is that you're good with people as a manager, as a the guys like you. I know that they do. I've met James. I met him in Sydney, and I can see by his loyalty to you and the kind of things that he's doing, and I can see that you're not having any problems. You're not telling me about all these problems you're having with employees. Every time that you mention it, it's all good. So I know that this is a strength of yours, is employing people. So I'm already of that mind where I'm going to be saying to other guys, talk to Alex when it comes to how to handle your staff and kind of things too. Because, so if I asked you for a couple of pieces of advice, what would you give?
Um, I'd say don't treat them like your friends. Make them your friends. Like, be friends with them. Like, the funny thing is, Jackson I already was friends with, so it was so easy for me just to bring him in. But James aside, him aside, when I hired James, it was just like, it ultimately came down to who. At the end of the day, it was who do I like the best out of the three people that I hired, and they're all nice guys. Like, they seem like really, but I felt I connected more with James, and I felt a sense of what's the word? I felt like he sort of had a sense of professionalism, and
Yes.
yeah, I just got for lack of a more technical term, I just got a good vibe from him, and I sort of just over a period of about a month hiring him, I just I reinforced that, and it's just
Fantastic.
been unproblematic. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you've managed to do there is you've selected the right person. So the process of finding the right person obviously was a big part of it, and you did really well there. But that's the first point I'll take from that. The second is that you treat them as friends, and you're treating them as equals is probably the real term here, because when we think of friends, we think of equals. We don't treat our friends, we don't have this kind of hierarchy thing going on. So this is,
Another
I think,
thing. Sorry,
yep.
if I could just jump in. The final thing was I gave them constant support, validation, and training. So I wasn't afraid to tell them what they'd done wrong, but I also made sure that I was there. Like, if they made a mistake or something, I wouldn't go like, well, you kind of mucked that up, didn't you? It was kind of like, hey, look, that happens. I did that like 20 times when I did it. Maybe just try doing it this way. This might be more effective.
Fantastic. And that's actually absolute gold. It is, with employees having that understanding that they're learning. They're almost like, when they start, they don't know your business like you do. They don't know, how everything works, and yet we see it all the time where people hire someone, and it's a classic scenario. They're busy, they're stressed, and they need staff. And so they hire someone, and they say to them in the interview, all right, do you think you can do this job? And the person in the interview is, well, I want the money, yeah, I can do the job. All right, okay, I'll start paying you on Monday, turn up, bang, here's the keys to the studio, off you go. And then students start dropping out, and the owner's going, what are you doing? You're doing it all wrong, you're an idiot, blah, blah, blah. And then next thing they know, the staff member's stressed because they're getting it wrong, and it's not that they're getting it wrong, it's as if they're not doing it the way that the manager or the owner wants it to be done, but the responsibility lies on the owner, because the owner didn't train them in the way that they wanted it to be done. They just gave them the keys, thinking that they could read their mind, and that's the very important is the key, and letting your staff know it's okay. You're making mistakes, that's fine. You don't know this yet, you're learning it. That's what we're here to do. And I've seen kind of cases where people will treat their staff like in this case, we're teaching, where they'll actually treat the students really well, but they'll treat their staff really badly, and yet they should be treating their staff like they treat their customers or their students in our case.
Better.
Um,
I mean,
yeah,
students can be fleeting, but like you have to deal with your staff members like for a significant period of time. Like definitely, like you may have a student here one week and gone the next. Not like you should, you know. I think you should almost prioritize staff members over students. You know?
totally. Your staff should always come first, because without your staff, if your staff aren't happy and it's not working with them, then yeah, you're gonna just, the problems are gonna filter down to your customers. They're gonna treat. Whenever I walk into a business and I get kind of a snarly employee or someone, I know it's the management. I know it's either they're hiring the wrong people or they're putting their people under pressure or treating them badly or whatever. I know it's connected to their management. I don't blame the person there. If I have problems, I don't look at that person and go, "You're ruining my life." I just go, "You're unhappy. You're in an unhappy organisation. I get it. All right. Either I won't deal with that organisation until they sort their stuff out, or I'll just put up with it if I have to, and not blame the person standing on the other side of the counter." Okay, so great points, and this is a prime strength of yours, Alex. I would really put you up in that, and it's something that probably comes natural to you to a certain degree as well. You're a nice guy. You're a people person. You treat everyone equally, fairly. You don't have this. You never give people the feeling that you're better than they are. So that's why I think it comes to you, and I think that anyone within G4, if you're open to it, if they've got questions, they should come to you.
Definitely. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, it's like a privilege to impart knowledge to people. So yeah, it would be. Yeah. I mean, it's a nice thing to do.
Excellent. Okay, so I'll go to Ben now. Ben, let's just work out your strength. It's pretty obvious from my point of view, so I'll tell you my point of view, and then you can sort of feed me back some thoughts. Ben is very pedantic. He likes things to be correct. He's not one to tolerate, jobs that are half done. And Ben has just done an amazing job of going right through the G4 materials, and he continues to do it. He's going through our blogs at the moment. He's been right through all the G4 materials and crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's, fixed all the grammar mistakes, and it's something I never would have done. When people, I put things together and then I work through it. I go through it again, and look for some mistakes, and then somebody will say to me, as Michael Essery did many times, look, there's an error here, Dave, or that doesn't seem to make sense, or what's this? So I'm all about doing that. I'm kind of that. I'm the visionary. I'm the one who, let's just push it ahead. Let's get going. All right. We're not. This is not a spacecraft going to the moon. This is just we're teaching guitar here. We can iron out a lot of the problems as we go. So, Ben, where does this come from with you? Why are you so pedantic? Why are you so good at this?
Because I don't know. It's got to be right.
You've got to have it right. So does it kind of irritate you if it's not right? Is that how it feels? Or?
Well, I think it's because, well, as you say, I do love language, and I was talking about earlier on Facebook, you can't get the tone. And I used to talk a lot online with my friends on, MSN. So I just found that I was trying to do things and say things in a way that made the tone come across. So anytime you make a spelling mistake or a little punctuation mistake, I read it exactly as it kind of is written, because I think, what's he trying to say there? So I'll read a space halfway through a word, and I will pause as I'm reading it. So it's just I naturally feel like I have to do it, otherwise it breaks my flow. So, but you say it's a strength. It can definitely, people get very annoyed by it. I'm glad you've taken it as a positive.
I see it as a huge strength, and it's something that now I know if I've got something that it's actually quite comforting to know that Ben's there. That you're there, Ben, because I know that you're going to be checking things, and you're going to be, and you're someone that I can refer to if I'm unsure. You know, is this? How do you think this reads, Ben? You know, it's like at the moment we're working on the parenting book, which is going to, once we get it done, everybody will get a copy and you can give it to the parents. This is just such a good, you know, I'm good, as you'll see, at certain aspects of it. I'm good at simplifying things down to basic elements so people understand. And whereas Ben will come in and really be able to sort of make sure all the grammar's right, make sure that, you know, it doesn't look unprofessional. And it's interesting because Ben, I had a guy who's looking at coming on the network, joining, and he said to me, he said, "Can I just give you one criticism?" He said, "I don't want to offend you, but just there's one thing." I said, "Sure." He said, "Your book, The Essential Guide to Teaching Guitar," he said, "there's quite a few grammatical errors." And he said, "To be honest, it makes you look a bit unprofessional." And I said, "Thank you, you're right. That's a weakness of mine. I do rush through things and just because I want to get things done. But now I've got Ben on the team, so don't worry, he'll be onto it."
Yeah, send it along. I'll be over it. It's the short one, isn't it? It's not the hour-and-a-half book. It's the not audio, but hour-and-a-half audio book, and then about 30-page book, something like that.
It's I think it's about 30 pages or something like that at the moment.
I can go through that, no problem.
Yeah, I'm just sort of going through it now, but when I do, I'll send it to you, and yeah, if you can have a look at it, that'd be great.
Cool, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so again, across the network, this is Ben's strength. This is something that he's really good at. If you've got anything, literature or emails or things that you stand out as standard stuff, it's worth sharing with Ben. And it's not just that he will look at it and correct it. It's that Ben actually he wants to see that because he knows that it's going to help him as well. He'll see an email that you've done for a particular problem. He knows that if he can get a copy of that email, fix whatever grammar needs to be fixed, as long as you don't get offended by that, because he's not trying to offend you. He's just trying to help. He's just trying to make it, you know, a better example that I can give, or a kind of similar example, is that my wife is fanatical about clean, you know, and she's the kind of woman that you go to a hotel room and she'll actually clean the hotel room before you can actually stay in the room. She's a bit weird and crazy like that, but you've got to love her. But, you know, we talk about, you know, she used to watch the show Friends, and they used to talk about Monica clean, you know. Monica was one of the characters in Friends, and so it wasn't clean until it was Monica clean. But Tomoko takes it to another level, and we use that same term. It's not clean until it's Tomoko clean. So in this case, it's not done until Ben's looked at it in my book. So if you guys have these kind of certain scripts or emails or standard things that you do, it's really worth sending it to Ben and getting Ben to have a look at it. And that way, you know, the exchange there is that he'll look at any grammar and give you some feedback. Even if you think it's perfect, still let him have a look at it. But then in exchange, he gets to keep that email so he can use it for his students as well, if he finds it valuable. What we really want to do is, as a network, we want to bring everything together so we're all kind of sharing the same resources. And that's the idea. That's the network effect. Is everybody contributing. Okay, so Ben, you're covered. Michael, your strengths. Let's talk about them. There's plenty of them. So, in my opinion, the thing about Michael that really stuck with me early on is that he asked lots of questions. Michael was really the standout within G4 for me when he first joined, of someone who was like a child, completely innocent, just asking, but why? But why? But why? You know, that child who many adults would find annoying, but I know as soon as I get someone like that, and Ben's a little bit like this as well, constantly asking questions, I know this guy is going to be good. This is someone who, if they keep asking why, it's when they stop asking why that I get worried. It's when the questions stop happening that I become a little bit concerned that maybe they're getting off track, or they're getting a little bit, you know, overconfident, or you know, not learning anymore. But this is really something that Michael's done from the word go, and there's been a few quiet times, but that's life, and we all go through those. But for the most part, Michael has been someone who's very curious, and really doesn't just accept something. He will ask the question of why. So, Michael, just to sort of get some feedback from you, how did you find that helpful? Asking questions all the time. Why were you compelled to ask questions?
You pretty much summed it up, I suppose, because I don't like doing or saying anything unless I know the reason behind it. So, you know, if I know there's a law or a principle that's being passed and I have to follow that law, well, I want to know why. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. You know, if a doctor prescribes me some sort of medication, I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to just go, yeah, okay, yeah. So, yeah, I'm just that's the kind of person I am.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So this is something that, you know, and I've, you know, you guys have probably heard it in some of the audios and in different places, but I use Michael as an example a lot in, you know, the way that Michael went from being really, one of the main things for Michael is he came to G4 with no experience as a teacher. He joined G4 and he was really trained under Brendan. Is Brendan who spent most of the time with you, Michael, early on?
Well, Brendan is the one that he interviewed me, and he did a bit of training with me. But I think it was really the teachers at the time that were there, and they were all young as well. But I think they had been trained directly by you at Northbridge.
Yeah.
But yeah, Brendan did do a bit of training with me as well.
Okay.
And then later on, you came back in as well.
Yeah, we did some training when I came back. So really, you were very green when you started, right? You hadn't done any teaching before that.
No, I'd done, you know, just not really, professionally, I suppose. Yeah, I'd done, you know, some students from school and stuff like that, some friends or friends' kids and stuff like that, but not as a job, yeah, as such. And I actually didn't really have a great deal of experience on the guitar either. Like, so.
Right. Yeah. Well, so really keeping that kind of curious mind. That's what I would say to anyone is keep that curious questioning happening all the time. And really, what drives people's particular strengths are all different. But in this case, with you, Michael, it's really the fact that you need. I realised that with you fairly early too. That you need to know why. You're not just going to, you know. Sometimes we have this feeling like just accept it, just believe me, you know, just take it as a given. But Michael's not the kind of person who sits well with that. You know, I've got to actually tell him why I did particular things. So what Michael did for me was got me thinking. Well, okay, you know, why do I do that? And there were times where he actually asked me questions that I didn't actually know why, and I really had to think it through. I'd think, well, why do I do that particular thing? It works. I know it works, but I've never really thought about why I do it. And that's what happens when you teach. Kind of, the way that I evolved was that I was constantly wanting to find what worked. I've always been about the 80-20 for a long, long time. That's probably really the first thing that I adopted back in my early 20s. Is how do I get this to perform better? How do I make it improve? And that was always my way of thinking. I'd look at the different scenarios. There might be, you know, 5 different ways to treat a 6-year-old in their first guitar lesson, and I would look for the pattern of what worked best, and I would eliminate the things that didn't work, and then I would have another 5 scenarios, and then go from there. Keep refining it, and so that's why sometimes I didn't know why, but Michael was very good at that. So to sort of bring this to a close, you can see here that I've identified your individual strengths, and the fact that, first of all, you know that I know your strengths, that I'm aware of at least one of your strengths, and I acknowledge that strength, it's important for our connection and to understand that, and the fact that I respect it is very important as well, that I don't just take it for granted, that I know how valuable that strength is, to not just to me personally, but to the group, to the whole G4 network. Each of you have something very valuable to bring, and each of you really lead in what we're talking about here. So we've got, Alex with employees is outstanding. Ben, as far as checking the grammar and checking really being our proofreader of all the materials that are going to come across G4 and collating and organising. Ben is an absolute star, and Michael keeping us honest, really. Michael asking the hard questions of why do you do this, and I really think if I could just, it really kind of comes to mind now, Michael, really what you are kind of the moral. How can I say, the moral pillar, if you like, maybe, in that you're really keeping us honest by going, well, why do you do that? How do you do that? I know that if I tried to do anything that was even slightly dodgy, Michael would be onto us straight away and would say, this doesn't feel right. I can't justify doing that. So you can see the importance of each person in the group. You guys can see the importance of your contribution to G4, and that strengthens the group, and that's what you want to do with your students. You want to let each of them know what their strengths are, and be genuine about it. Really understand what they're contributing to that group and contributing to your school, because each of them are actually bringing something to your school. Every single student you have is contributing somehow, and if you acknowledge that and let them know that it's important to you, the school, them, the students, etc., you're just going to build a stronger and stronger community. Okay, what do we got here? So I'll just read some of the notes I've got here. I'm the same. The why behind the rule is like connecting the skill to the song. Exactly. If I don't know the purpose, then I'm not practicing. Yeah, so you've got to know. You can't just practice aimlessly. You've got to know what the purpose of your practice is. It's why I see sometimes that people who might be practicing, let's say, harmonic minor scales, for instance, and yet all they really want to play is blues. They have no interest in any other style of music. They're just mad about the blues. But you're not going to have a lot of use for harmonic minor scales playing blues. Okay, it's good to know them. Sure, practice them. I don't have any problem with practicing them. But how's it going to connect to the music that you're playing? That's what you've got to ask. You've got to really come down to what you're practicing. How does it connect to what you are going to do, and what you're going to play? I'm quite sure players like Angus Young, I don't think he practices a lot of harmonic minor scales. He certainly doesn't practice melodic minor scales, but he never uses them. He never plays them. He plays around the blues scale. That's all he does, and he does it very well. Okay, so Michael, make connections, involve and acknowledge, create a social space, and highlight strengths. Great. Yeah, you've more or less highlighted the points. So that's the 4 things. We want to connect the group members, find that common ground. Number 2 is acknowledge each person's input and encourage them to give more. The more that they give to the group, the more they'll feel part of the group. They'll feel a sense of ownership. Number 3, make it easy to connect, set out the platform, and praise their strengths in front of the group. We like to be around those people who we admire. Now, I'll just ask you guys, what did you get out of today's group? I'll start with you, Alex. What did you get out of today's talk?
Probably mostly the idea of creating a social space. Like I hadn't really considered why having a waiting room was so important. I thought, oh yeah, cool, because you could have something connect to the 2 rooms. That makes sense. But it really reinforced the idea that, and I totally respect it too, because my best group is a bunch of teenagers that there's no one after them, so they have an opportunity to hang around, and consequently they're really good friends. They like each other a lot. So that totally resonates with me. Just the idea of creating a social space. I'm not 100% how I'm going to do it, because I would like to create a physical one. But we'll see. I'll figure something out.
Fantastic. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So work on creating more of the social space, so your students can come together. Okay. Cool. Ben.
Basically the same. But
just before you talk, just your point there, Robin Ford. Yes, Robin Ford's great. I mean, Robin Ford really sort of, he dabbles in. He really crosses that. It's almost like fusion.
Yeah, he's a bit jazzy, isn't he?
He is a bit jazzy, yeah, definitely a jazzy. So again, it depends on what you want, and he loves that genre. He loves moving into that there. So yeah, I get what you're saying. That's great. Right, sorry, go on.
I was mostly the same as Alex, but obviously not having a location yet, just teaching at home. It's not quite as good having them in my kitchen.
Yeah,
So I think the Facebook group's definitely something I'm going to look into. Might have to make it a bit more local. Might have to wait till I've got maybe 20, 30 students, because that'll give me a good basis to kind of... Because I really think the most important thing would be to have something happening in there. I'd prefer to have at least a couple of active people. So if I work out who's going to be really active, invite them to the group, get them, bring in some other people and get that active, work on who's already friends and who's already very active on Facebook.
yes.
I can do that quite easily by checking out their profiles, seeing how often they post, things like that.
Yeah, sounds good. Excellent. Yeah, it's just do what you can do now. You know, it's about where are you at, and really building your taking these kind of 4 points that we've covered today and employing them based on what you can do at this moment. There's always plenty you can do. It's really limitless.
Yeah.
You know, number of ideas you've got, but you just work on what you can now. What will give you the best return right now and having that vision of, okay, you know, thinking kind of along the lines of Richard Branson, of having that, you know, public space where you can bring students in, sitting around and talking and chatting and having kind of a waiting area. And that's why these places like the Institute, you know, the Musicians Institute in Hollywood, we have one in Australia as well, based on the same idea really. That's why these places do well, is because they have that social space. They bring all the students into one area and they sort of run into each other and have, you know, lunch together and, you know, debate the merits of different musicians. And yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Michael, what did you get out of today?
Same as the other guys too. I think I definitely will get onto creating a Facebook group, because I've, you know, there is the beginnings of a community here, but it's just trying to get them to connect, because obviously they're all coming at different times too as well. But yeah, just because I don't have the option at the moment of having a separate waiting room, I will have to try and do something online for the meantime. But I think in the first point too, making connections between students, I've attempted it in the past, and when it sort of gets a bit quiet and awkward, I just sort of back off and let's get back onto guitar. So I think maybe I haven't done that enough. Maybe I haven't tried hard enough with that. So that's my plan, is to try and spend a bit more time on that, because I also think, well, I don't want to spend 10 minutes of the lesson just asking them questions about, you know, because they're thinking, oh, well, I'm here to play guitar, you know, let's get on with it, sort of thing. So,
Yep.
but it's obviously really important at the same time. So, yeah, it's just trying to find that balance. I also had one more question just regarding the Facebook thing. I've always been of two minds. Do you recommend friending students with your personal account, or would you just invite them to a group?
Just invite them, yeah. You don't need to friend them. If they want to friend you, great. Yeah, you can accept their friendship. But it's the same with you guys. You know, a lot of you guys are friends of mine on Facebook, but I don't actively try and friend you. If you friend me, which a lot of you have, then I accept it, because I don't see Facebook as a... I'm not trying to hide anything on Facebook. It's not a place where I'm not going to put up pictures and, you know, comments to things that are too radical or out there. If I've got some strong opinion on something, occasionally, you know, if I think it's a good cause, I will. But I'm fairly moderate, I guess, in my views anyway. But it's really depending on what you're trying to do on Facebook. I see, you know, occasionally I see guys who, and they're actually guitar teachers, where they have, you know, some pretty obscene things on their Facebook page, and yet they're teaching kids. So, you know, and this is public information. So you imagine parents, they see those kind of things, they're going to really think, oh, I don't want this guy teaching my child. So if you don't have anything to hide, then there's no reason to not accept their friendship. But don't actively ask for theirs. I never do that. So.
Regarding kids in Facebook groups, I've noticed a lot of parents and kids, I'll say, oh yeah, you know, join the Facebook page, and they're like, oh, look, I'm not allowed to use Facebook. Like, up till the age of at least, I don't know, maybe 14 or 15, I've I mean, I'm sure a lot of my older students do have it, but I know a lot of younger kids, like the 12, 13-year-olds, are just saying, no, I'm not allowed to have Facebook. So, I don't know, I guess that kind of limits it a little bit. But, yeah, there's adults and stuff that we have as well, so there's no reason to not invite those, I suppose.
Yeah, and look, maybe really, sitting from your point of view, I think more about parents. Just saying, look, we have a Facebook page or a group, which is about, it's more like a notice board. It's about providing information for you and giving you a platform to ask questions. And I know what you're saying, where you have a 10-year-old or something, 8-year-old, and you say, okay, I'm going to post this up in the Facebook group. Well, they're going to say, well, I don't have a Facebook page. My parents don't let me use Facebook, so therefore I can't access that. So I totally understand what you're saying. What you want to do is just really have that Facebook group and talk to parents and say, look, we have a Facebook group for our students. I understand, your child's too young to be part of Facebook, but you are welcome to go there and get information. And what we do is we actually provide a lot of information for parents as well within that group. Yeah, I admit it's a tough one. I admit that we don't really want to encourage kids to be on Facebook at a young age, because it's not a good. I don't think it's good for young kids to be on Facebook, because there's a lot of bullying and stuff that goes on there, a lot of inappropriate stuff for young kids. So probably I wouldn't be encouraging young kids to be on Facebook, but I would be talking to parents. Maybe call it a parent. If you've got a guitar player group for your local area, that's the first thing that I'm thinking about, and that's a social thing just for guitar players in the area. So that kind of creates that. It's really taking teens to adults, whereas for the younger kids, create a parent group and just say that I have a group on my Facebook which is for parents. It's not for the kids, it's for the parents. And then you can say to the parents, I'm putting up a video of, where I did the video, for instance, with Mia. You can say, I'm putting up a video there of David Hart, who's the CEO of G4, showing how he teaches his 5-year-old. That'll be on the parent Facebook page. So I think that might be a better angle, is selling it as a parent support page rather than a for your, you definitely don't want a Facebook page for young students.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? We're done for today. Looks like we've done well. Had a few false starts there, but we've made it. All right. I shall let you go, guys. Have a great day, and this will be up live very soon. Thanks again for your time. I really appreciate your input, and see you soon.
Cool. Thanks, David. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.